Alright, I know that I said that I was going to be taking a break and that the next Iceberg stuff would be for Edda and Eddie like next year. But this is just something that I spontaneously really wanted to make and get out there from watching a bunch of different stuff. And as you can see on that, that's on Icebergs for Ocarina of Time. And I've seen a lot of stuff for Zelda, like specifically the series in general in terms of icebergs. And some of them are okay, but I honestly think that like a lot of them have like some dumb entries. Not to say they're all bad, like it's mostly good for them. But aside from that, it seems like that they're all usually just for like the series in general, with like maybe Ocarina just happening to have most of the focus. Or they're for both Ocarina and Majora's Mask. And then there's what I want to make, which is one just for Ocarina of Time, just specifically that game. The only like exceptions if it's like a direct like connection or tie to something else. And there's one that I know of that's specifically for Ocarina of Time, and it's been up for a bit, and a video was more recently put out for it. And it's the one that Mishkos wanted to do. And he's the guy who did that really popular Mario 64 video that was really good. And he recently did that, and while the video itself was alright, that's mainly the term for most of these icebergs, the one that he chose to do it on ended up being a pretty big like disappointment to a lot of the viewers, like myself included, which is like what's part of what got me over here. And a lot of the entries on there were just like either like really like odd or completely made up for the iceberg, and some of them were also just like kind of like misplaced or had like weird layers that they were put in. And other people said that it just sounds like they browsed through the cutting room floor page and just slapped some of those on there without much consideration of their importance. And other icebergs I've seen just like kind of follow this, or they do a better job, but it's not just for Ocarina specifically. And I thought about it after seeing a lot of them. I was like, man, I kind of want to make my own definitive version of this. And I thought over it enough, and eventually I decided to list out a bunch of entries that I would put in one. And what I did is that I just took all of my knowledge, everything I know, every stupid little detail, every rumor, every legit theory for Ocarina of Time. I listed all of it down, I separated it by layers, and I'm going to show you all of them in this video coming up soon. Well, like coming up in 30 seconds probably. And I omitted any dumb entries, like theories that are just solely made up to be creepy or copy Mario 64 or have no prior history to when the image was made, such as the Arya apparition. And as you can probably tell by now, this video is mainly for people who have been following that and know about Ocarina of Time and its whole entire jazz. And I'm hoping that a lot of you are watching this, because my plan for this is that I want all of you to look at the many entries that I have for this and say what you think about them, include your own, and give context behind your entry if you have a new one to include. And also let me know if you think that like a placement of one of mine can be changed. And maybe eventually we'll have a real definitive Iceberg for Ocarina of Time made. So anyway, I'm going to start showing you everything I wrote down, and it's just all going to appear on the screen at once for each layer, so I suggest you pause. I'm not going to explain each entry, I'm just going to give a very general description of the layer, and I want you to read the list from top down, and then go right and read top down from that too. Anyway, here is what I have for the sky. As you can see, it's like the most basic Easter eggs and like shared thoughts and gameplay stuff for this. Like anybody who's played the game would be able to like relate to all of these or like know what you're talking about. At least for most of them, once you get done, it's maybe like slightly obscure Easter eggs. The next for the tip follows this pattern. It's just slightly more like obscure Easter eggs you can find in the game playing it normally. And then very common knowledge again, like the Cut Fire Temple music. And then we go down to the iceberg itself. And this is where it starts to get like a bit more obscure. Like you have to look into the game more, be like a bigger fan to know about these. It's like more general trivia and some rumors and stuff and glitches, there's a lot of that. And then by the end of this layer, that's when we start talking about beta stuff. And then you go down to underwater, and that's when I start talking about like more obscure trivia about the game, like things and Easter eggs that didn't really get like more mainstream known until much more recently. And this is also where it has like basically all the beta stuff that you can find on the cutting room floor that was in that one video that Mishkaz did. Again, despite my criticisms, there are some good entries on there. In fact, most of them are pretty decent entries despite the weird placement. So I include all of those on here as part of the definitive edition. And then you go down a layer towards the middle, and this is more so where I start talking about like rumors such as the Light Temple and the Overture Sages, like all of that stuff that was going on in the late 90s, as well as like more weird things such as like underutilized gold gauntlets and that tunnel that's under New Source Domain, and also like more things to look into for the game. And I also talk about Or Zelda. And then once we go down even further, that's when I get like much more like obscure trivia or like shared thoughts on the game, such as how stab damage works, or like how memorable 23's number 1 surprisingly is, as well as like stuff involving the source code leak that happened back in summer. And then once we get to like the bottom of the iceberg, that's where I get some more like personalized, weirder feelings that like people don't really talk about, such as the need to destroy every boulder, as you can see. And by the way, I include Arya in one of the top layers, like just her, since she is interesting herself, but I didn't include like all that apparition shit. I probably should have mentioned that earlier, sorry. I got Midori Rashi theme on this layer anyway, but yeah, just more like weird, obscure things on it. And then at the very end of the layer is like the most like deep stuff I could think of, and the most obscure things too, and weird. But yeah, sorry that this is kind of like a clusterfuck thing to look at. Again, you should pause if you need to when going back, and this video is also kind of rushed and hasty and not scripted at all. But yeah, anyway, I want you again to say any entries that are on here that you think could be included, just give some context to it, or if you think anything can be changed on this. And once this video is up for a while and gets like attention and people like sharing things, will I make an image for this? Maybe not myself. I think that should go to somebody who has the software and the time and the patience to organize all of these and like zoom in well and be able to put in like the many entries together and fit and look nice. But I would be willing to talk about it and help it out. And will I make a video series on this? That's probably an even stronger no. I don't really want to, especially since I said Ed and Eddie's next, and this especially would take absolutely fucking forever. But maybe never say never. I would be more willing to help somebody who wants to make their own video series on this iceberg. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll be back whenever, I don't know, with other stuff.